In this video, we're going to create our first Shadergraph material. We're going to be using the tiling and offset on our UVs and create a scrolling effect on our object. To begin, we right-click in Project, Create, Shader, PBR Graph. We're going to call this Color Scroll. We double-click the shader to open our graph, and you can see the components. We have our parameters window, our master, and our main preview. With this shader, we're going to be feeding everything through the emission channel. So this will emit light from the object and it will seemingly change the color and appearance. To get started, we need to import a texture that we're going to use. So we're going to create a texture 2D. We'll call this our gradient and we'll search through, and as you can see, I've imported a 512 by 512 gradient from Photoshop. To get started, we'll press space on the background, search texture, and select sample texture 2D. We'll now drag our gradient parameter into the graph, and we're going to plug this into the texture here. You'll see that it's shown a quick preview, and if we plug this into our emission, we've got a slight effect on our object. If we darken our color, you'll see we get much more of an effect from that emission. So we've already started to apply changes to our material, but now we want to work to scrolling the UV so it looks as though the texture is moving. To do this, again, we'll press space on the background and we want to search for the tiling and offset node. Here we can plug the out into our UV. And at the moment, there's minimal change because we need to feed information into the UV, tiling and offset parameters of this node. The first of which, we're going to take the position node and feed this into the UV. And you'll see already we have a little bit of a change, and all of these nodes will update as you feed information through, so you get a real-time preview of what you're creating. This allows you to tweak different values and experiment with ideas. Now our second parameter we're going to create is a vector 2, and we're going to call this scroll speed. To begin with, I'm just going to have our texture scroll along the Y, so I'm going to change this to a speed of 1. If I drag this over, I could plug this into the offset option here, and you'll see that it is just offset the texture. There's no animation here, it is just offset it by a value of 1 on the Y axis. So we want to move this over time, so we can click and drag to select the line and hit delete to remove the connection. And we're going to press space and search for the time node. And what we want to do is offset our texture using our scroll speed multiplied by time. So we can search multiply and select the node here, or we can click and drag from the property into a blank space, search for multiply, and we want to select A, as this is the parameter we want it to feed into. We'll then take our time value, put it into B, and we'll put the out onto our offset. And already you can see a drastic change. We have our color scrolling through space and animating on our material. Now at the moment, we have limited control over the gradient image itself, but what if we wanted to change how frequent the stripe is? If we now move these nodes out of the way, so click and drag to select all and move them, we're going to change the tiling option here. If I change the Y value to 5, you'll see there's much more frequency in the stripes. But we don't want to have to open our shader graph constantly to change this and get it right. So we'll change that back to 1. We'll make a brand new vector 2, and we'll call this tiling. If I drag this down and plug this into our tiling parameter here, I can achieve the same effect if I put 1 and 1 in here, change the Y to 5 or more. The benefit of creating the parameters like this means that we can easily change these values in the editor and alter our material live in runtime. So we'll click Save Asset. We'll close the shader graph, and now to create the material, we right-click the shader, go to Create, and Material. We'll call this Color Scroll, and if I drag and drop this onto our sphere, you see we have our animated material live in-game. I can now change my scroll speed if I want it to move a bit faster. I could change if I want it to move on the X as well, and I can change my tiling. so you get a lot more customization. Additionally, we can change the texture. I've imported a few into the folder here, and if I select the material, go to textures, I could change the texture out to see what sort of effect I have. Some will be more drastic than others, but it's up to you to try and create something that works for your game. So there you have it, one of your first Shadergraph materials, animating a scrolling UV texture.